The wind howled like a living beast, tearing across a desolate white plain where no sound of life dared follow. In the icy heart of Antarctica, a small group of men trudged forward, their faces blistered and hollow with exhaustion. At their center walked a man whose name would echo across generations, Robert Falcon Scott. To his men, he was not simply their commander, but a figure of unyielding will, driven by a vision so great that even death itself could not diminish it. His story is not one of simple triumph nor untainted failure. It is the tale of a man who embodied the extremes of human courage, ambition, and tragedy. Robert Falcon Scott was born on June 6, 1868, in Plymouth, Devon, England. The second of 6 children in a middle-class family, Scott's early life was marked by a deep connection to the sea. His father, John Edward Scott, was a brewer, while his mother, Hannah, provided the nurturing backbone of the family. Young Robert's upbringing was neither extravagant nor impoverished, but it carried the weight of expectation. From childhood, Robert was fascinated with discipline and duty. The sea offered an escape, but it also represented a career that promised adventure. By the time he was a teenager, the Royal Navy seemed not just a possibility, but a destiny. At the age of 13, Scott entered the Royal Navy as a cadet on the training ship Britannia. The rigid environment suited him well. He quickly earned a reputation for precision, intelligence, and a quiet but commanding presence. Unlike many of his peers, Scott did not dazzle with flamboyance, but instead impressed with consistency and resolve. As he advanced through the naval ranks, Scott displayed a natural talent for leadership, though his career was not without setbacks. The Navy was undergoing a period of transition, and advancement was often tied to opportunity as much as skill. Yet, Scott persevered, earning assignments that took him across the world's oceans. Scott's path toward exploration might never have taken shape if not for a chance encounter. In 1899, he met Sir Clements Markham, president of the Royal Geographical Society, who had long envisioned a British expedition to the Antarctic. Markham was struck by Scott's demeanor and potential. Here was a man disciplined by naval life yet restless for greater challenges. In that moment, destiny shifted. Robert Falcon Scott was drawn into the orbit of polar exploration, a field that combined science, national pride, and personal daring. In 1901, Scott was appointed leader of the Discovery Expedition, Britain's first official exploration of Antarctica since James Clark Ross in the 1840s. Commanding the specially designed ship RRS Discovery, Scott set sail with a team of scientists and sailors eager to pierce the mysteries of the frozen continent. The journey south was arduous, but when the men first glimpsed the towering ice shelves and alien landscapes, they knew they were on the edge of the unknown. The expedition established a base on Ross Island, where they endured 2 long Antarctic winters. Scott pushed further inland than any Briton had before, traveling with Ernest Shackleton and Edward Wilson. Though the trio did not reach the South Pole, they ventured to a then-record latitude of 82 degrees 19 south. The hardships they endured, frostbite, snow blindness, malnutrition, were staggering. Yet the Discovery Expedition returned home hailed as a triumph, not just for Britain's honor, but for science, as the men collected valuable data on geology, biology, and meteorology. Scott's return to England was met with acclaim. He had become a national figure, a symbol of Edwardian bravery and determination. The age was steeped in imperial pride, and polar exploration was seen as an extension of Britain's global dominance. Yet beneath the public adoration, Scott felt a gnawing hunger. The pole had not been reached. The ultimate prize of the Antarctic, the conquest of the South Pole, remained unclaimed. By 1909, the stakes of polar exploration had escalated. Ernest Shackleton's Nimrod expedition had come within 97 miles of the pole, a near victory that electrified the public. Scott felt the pressure keenly. If Britain were to claim the pole, it had to be him who carried the flag. But another challenger had entered the race, Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen. Unlike Scott, Amundsen was a master of polar technique, skilled in skiing and the use of sled dogs. The stage was set for one of the greatest rivalries in exploration history. In 1910, Scott embarked on his second and final expedition aboard the ship Terra Nova. His goal was unequivocal: to reach the South Pole before anyone else. Funded by public subscriptions and private donations, the mission carried the weight of national expectation. The voyage south was fraught with challenges. Storms battered the ship, and delays plagued the expedition. Upon reaching the Antarctic coast, Scott established base camp at Cape Evans. From there, the long march to the pole began. Unlike Amundsen, who relied heavily on sled dogs, Scott chose a mixed strategy of dogs, ponies, and man-hauling sledges. This decision would prove disastrous. The ponies, unsuited to Antarctic conditions, soon perished. The dogs provided some relief but were eventually sent back. The men were left to haul their sledges through the brutal landscape, burning through their strength with every mile. The march was grueling. Temperatures plummeted, storms raged, and frostbite gnawed at fingers and toes. Yet Scott pressed onward, driven by duty and pride. His companions, Edward Wilson, Henry Bowers, Lawrence Oates, and Edgar Evans, followed with unwavering loyalty. On January 17, 1912, Scott and his men finally reached the South Pole, but their triumph turned instantly to despair. There, fluttering in the icy wind, stood the Norwegian flag. Amundsen had arrived first, 5 weeks earlier. Scott's journal recorded the devastation. "Great God, this is an awful place and terrible enough for us to have labored to it without the reward of priority." Defeated, the men began the long journey home. The return trek was catastrophic. Edgar Evans was the first to collapse, succumbing to injury and exhaustion. As supplies dwindled and frostbite worsened, the men's condition became dire. Lawrence Oates, suffering terribly, made his legendary sacrifice on March 17, 1912. He stepped out of the tent into a blizzard, telling his companions, "I am just going outside and maybe sometime." Still, Scott, Wilson, and Bowers pressed on. By late March, they were trapped in their tent, just 11 miles short of a supply depot. Scott's final diary entry, dated March 29, 1912, bore the words, "For God's sake, look after our people." The men never rose again. 8 months later, a search party found their frozen bodies in the tent, surrounded by letters and diaries. Scott's words, preserved against the cold, revealed not only the agony of the journey, but also his unshakable sense of duty and dignity in the face of death. When news of Scott's death reached Britain, the nation was plunged into mourning. He was hailed as a martyr of exploration, a man who sacrificed everything in the name of country and science. His story became legend, inspiring countless books, memorials, and generations of explorers. Though later critics would question his decisions, his reliance on ponies, his handling of supplies, Scott's legacy endured. He was not remembered for losing a race, but for embodying the spirit of endurance and sacrifice. Facts about Robert Falcon Scott. Scott's middle name, Falcon, came from his grandmother's maiden name. He once considered a career in law before fully committing to the Navy. During the Discovery expedition, penguins became a favorite subject of scientific study. Scott's nickname among his men was the Owner. His expedition was one of the first to use motor sledges in Antarctica, though they failed quickly. Scott carried letters from King George V to deposit at the pole. He was an accomplished sketch artist, often drawing landscapes and wildlife. His son, Peter Scott, became a famous naturalist and co-founder of the Worldwide Fund for Nature, WWF. Scott's tent and belongings remained in Antarctica for decades, preserved by the cold. A British research station in Antarctica is named Scott Base in his honor. Robert Falcon Scott's life was a tapestry of ambition, resilience, and tragedy. He did not achieve the glory of planting the first flag at the pole, but his name endures as a symbol of human determination in the harshest of environments. His story is not just about a race lost, but about the eternal pursuit of discovery, the courage to endure unimaginable hardship, and the ability to face death with words that still echo across time. As the snow drifted over his final camp, Scott became more than a man. He became a legend. His life reminds us that the measure of greatness lies not only in victory, but in the unbreakable spirit that dares to reach for it, even against impossible odds.